talking this second season of From, a TV show from the producers of Lost, and even has one of its actors, Harold Perrineau, have a starring role in this one. And it's a very similar show in a lot of ways to Lost, essentially being the horror equivalent, really. Now, I've obviously watched the first season quite recently, and the second season had just finished. So I've just actually now caught up and watched the entirety of the second season. I'll give you a brief kind of idea of the series as a whole. I'm not going to go into spoilers. But essentially, From is about this kind of strange, out-of-the-way, kind of rural American town, although it is filmed in Canada. And the idea is that you enter at different points. So you could be driving along the road in Vermont, and all of a sudden you'll come across a tree in the road, and then you'll take a diversion, and you end up in this town. But this can happen all over America. And once you're in this town, you can't leave. It's essentially like a loop. And there's a variety of kind of supernatural things that seem to happen in this town. Primarily, of a night, you get these kind of vampire-looking kind of creatures wandering around the town, trying to entice you to kind of come outside. And if you do, they're going to kill you. But that's not the only thing that's kind of going on. And the first season, we were introduced to a family which kind of ended up at this town for the first time, along with some established characters. And at the very tail end of the first season, we see a busload of new people going to turn up. So this obviously picks up where that left off. So we were introduced to a couple of new characters, not as many as you would have thought, considering there was a busload of new sort of characters. Obviously, when someone first turns up at this town, no one kind of knows what's kind of going on. So kind of people panic. So it's all a case of, very much like with the first family in the first season, is that you have to try and convince people to do what you say. Of course, they don't believe what's going on. But it has, like, really, I suppose, two new characters that have something to do. The rest of them don't have a hell of a lot to do, to be honest. So, how does the second season, without spoilers, compare to the first and overall? It's very much the same. You know, it has this kind of like deepening mystery. In actual fact, more things are introduced here. There's actually a new threat which is introduced on top of the kind of like the vampire-like creatures. And this new threat seems to be where your dreams are able to kind of like influence reality and kill you to a degree. So now people are kind of like scared to go to sleep. I'm surprised no one mentioned Nightmare on Elm Street, to be honest with you. That seemed like the perfect segue for a kind of little bit of dark humour in regards to kind of making that comparison. But that was an opportunity that they didn't take. But it's kind of similar. You have these kind of like things that you dream about, which might be connected to this area, and that ultimately affects the kind of the reality. We've also got some development with some of the biology of these kind of vampires, and we get a couple of theories that are thrown around in regards to what's kind of going on, and a couple of kind of characters trying to figure out, you know, is there a way out? Can they get there? And a few theories about what this actually place might be. So what do we think? What works? I mean, it's a continuing mystery, and it very much is, again, it's feeling more like Lost with each season now, with more questions being asked of the audience without really revealing, you know, anything at all. Is there any answers in this season? Not really. You get a couple of like partial answers, I would say, in regards to some of the aspects that are there, but none of the kind of the questions are answered. Where is it? What are these kind of monsters? You know, what is this place? All of that is still kind of unanswered in this kind of in this season. And I have to say, some things seem to be a little bit kind of have dropped in the first season. You know, in this kind of town, we learned that there was these two communities that have slightly different kind of outlooks on their kind of their lives and their kind of what they actually do. The kind of this town, and we have this kind of large manor house who are a bit more kind of hedonistic and things. that seems to really have been dropped and didn't really go anywhere. So I'm wondering, I have to be honest with you, I wonder if this series is a little bit like Lost, where they really didn't have too much of a long-term game plan, and ended up kind of just making it up as it went along, and kind of, you know, introducing more things without really knowing where this was going. Because it didn't really seem to have any point in having these kind of two societies in this town, because they're largely just homogenised by this point, and it didn't really go anywhere. So why bother introducing it? And there's a couple of, like, again, smaller elements as well, which I thought, again, why introduce it? Because not a lot seems to be done with them. There are a few deaths, and you know, this kind of TV show is a little bit on the adult side. There is some gore. It's not as gory as season 1. There are monster attacks. There's not as many monster attacks as season 1, and there's plenty of kind of swearing and stuff like that. So it definitely has that kind of like that adult edge. I think the character work is all fairly good, and I kind of like the actors here. And I like how Harold Perrineau as like kind of our main sort of character. His name's Boyd, is kind of like, you know, likeable and interesting kind of lead character. It focuses more on him this season than compared to the new family as it did in kind of season 1. As Boyd definitely stands out now as the kind of the main character, with everyone else kind of being supporting roles here. I have to be honest though, I didn't really feel it moved the needle much. It's just a continuing kind of mystery without, I mean, it introduces a couple of new elements, one of which seems to be resolved possibly by the end of the season, but it doesn't really give you any real answers or any kind of genuine kind of idea. Like, there's a couple of maybe a little bit forward momentum in some of the kind of the mysteries, but it doesn't go all the way in sort of explaining at least one aspect of it, but it just goes maybe a partial way. My worry with TV, especially network TV, is that they have a tendency to be cancelled and then leave. This is I find it difficult to really invest in much TV, because unless it's something very, very kind of like major, like Game of Thrones, which gets a lot of publicity, a lot of TV shows just get cancelled and they're just left. And it's like, well, what a waste of time that was. So it's difficult for me to really get that invested in a TV show that doesn't get a huge amount of publicity, which this one doesn't, because a lot of the time they end up getting cancelled. I hope that doesn't happen with this one. I hope we get a resolution, but, you know, I have to be honest with you, it feels like there's so much kind of like a spaghetti mess of kind of plot lines and ideas here. I worry that it will just ended up getting left, or it will be very unsatisfying because they'll get the call that it's cancelled and stuff, to kind of like, well, you know, that's it now. But yeah, it's like the first season really. It just feels more of like more of the same. I don't think it really introduces anything too new. The new characters I don't think have a huge amount of impact. The new kind of like threat is really the only sort of I would say major development. And then things that were introduced last season, mild spoilers, like for example, you know, walking to the edge of the forest, what the kind of like one of the characters is hearing voices, one of the characters heard a voice on the radio. None of that is kind of resolved, and I do think this show should be looking at resolving some things, and maybe they're moving on to something else, rather than just introducing more and more and more, because it just feels like there's so much kind of like unresolved from season 1 that wasn't kind of really kind of addressed, and some of it's not even like brought up much at all, like the kind of the voice in the radio. It's kind of, you know, it was a cliffhanger at the end of season 1, but it's mentioned a couple of times, but we get no further information on it. And then, but it introduces more stuff, and like, you know, we're told that the vampire creatures are only the tip of the spear, you know, and but well, you know, no real resolutions at all. So I'm a bit worried this show is making promises it won't be able to check, if that makes sense. So, but it's if you like the first season, It's more of the same. I don't think it really is as scary or as introduces anything that will make you really remember a particular episode in this season. So I wouldn't say it was as strong as season 1, but it still is an entertaining movie, and a lot of that is down to some good character work, and it does have an interesting premise and kind of like some scary elements. And I like the fact that it's a little adult, but it's kind of like I hope in season 3 they don't do this again, and we do get more of a kind of like a at least answers to some of the stuff, and then maybe introduce some more stuff as it went along. We'll see. I'll give it a 6 out of 10. It's an above average score, just about, but I don't really think it's kind of fabulous, to be honest. Have you seen it? What did you think of season 2? Leave me a comment and I'll look forward to seeing you next time.